Hey guys, so for this video, I'm gonna be ranking all the Terminator films in the franchise, and actually, just for sake of doing something different, I'm also gonna include the TV series in here as well. I mean, it's different, so why not change things up? And as always, I'm probably gonna have some spicy takes in here, probably gonna piss some people off, I don't know, maybe, maybe not, but regardless, if you agree with my takes or you disagree, let your voice be heard in the comments. I appreciate any opinions and feedback, as always. Number 8. Terminator Genesis. Yeah, I'm gonna be very blunt here, very transparent, brutally transparent. This film is a train wreck. It comes across to me as a film where the executives and the writers were a bunch of chimps who were throwing shit at the wall just to see what sticks, like literal chimps throwing shit. That's to me what Terminator Genesis felt like. I mean, to start with, the story is incredibly bizarre. It was supposed to be the start of a new trilogy, so that's kind of code word for saying that the writers and producers were like, well, we'll figure this out later, right? Any weird questions or inconsistencies there are. But yeah, it's a sequel, but it's also a reboot. And you have like John Connor as the villain, and he had like someone else who's like trying to save Sarah Connor. Just a bunch of really unanswered questions that really shouldn't have been raised at all. Just for the sake of creating a trilogy, it was so forced. There's no soul at all. And on top of that, you got some really bad special effects, miscasting. I think this film was really miscasted, in my opinion. There's really not one good thing I can think about this movie, honestly. There's not one good thing where I can say, yeah, that was actually kind of cool. None of it was. It was such a waste of time, I think. Number 7, Terminator Salvation. So I think Salvation could have been great, could have been good, could have given us a trilogy of new ideas, a new direction, like where to take things, given the setting, the fact that it takes place in the future war, which I feel like is a concept that was long overdue to begin with, and it's a shame that we really haven't gone back to visit that era since. So I do think Christian Bale is good as John Connor. I think he was really well casted. I think the direction is fine. It has kind of a cool story going on, some cool action. But overall, the film I would say is very mediocre, very forgettable, or generic. That's probably the best way I can put it. So it doesn't really do anything for me where I kind of come back to watch it or wanting to rewatch it. I think the film has some fans, and I can understand why. But to me, it's like a great concept that just kind of feels very watered down. It could have been something more if put in the hands of more audacious writers and filmmakers in general, instead with what we got. Number 6, Terminator 3. Terminator 3 is also kind of generic, but it's also a fun movie, I think. It's fun. There's some memorable moments. I like it, and maybe it's because of nostalgia. I remember seeing this movie as a kid. But even beyond that, I think the movie has some strong points. I think the movie does a good job of, kind of expanding on some lore in the Terminator films, right? Showing other key figures in the Resistance in the future who are also being targeted. I think the character Kay, who plays John Connor's future wife, I thought she was a noteworthy character added to the mythos. Memorable set pieces. But beyond that, yeah, I think Terminator 3 is just okay. And at that point, the whole chase film formula it was already starting to feel stale at that point. But it's not bad. It's fun, if nothing else. Number 5, The Sarah Connor Chronicles. I would say this series, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, it's a much better executed version of Terminator 3. It follows largely the same plot, or at least the concept, the way they hook you into the series, where it's after Terminator 2, but they've only delayed the inevitable. I think that the series does a better job, at least at first, showing how Sarah Connor and John are trying to move on with their lives, still having this trauma attached to them. Of course, when trouble finds them, I think we get a lot more creative, intense scenarios in the series compared to like Terminator 3. And on top of that, I think there's a lot of new interesting plots that really expands the lore and mythos of the Terminator franchise. Of course, my only criticism would be that because of the TV series back then in the early 2000s, you can tell the budget was stretched very thin throughout the whole series, even back then, much less now. And then on top of that, I feel like the story kind of goes into a little more wackier directions, but more so for my taste. Number 4, Terminator Dark Fate. Okay, yeah, definitely a hot take, but I liked Terminator Dark Fate. I don't love it, but I like it. I mean, first let me get into like what I don't like about the film, just like sort of like reach out as an olive branch to people who hate this movie. Firstly, I think this film really does bring itself down by trying too hard to be a legacy sequel, which is a common trend or was a common trend. Where it's trying to do something different, but it still really copies the formula we've seen in all the other films, right? They're fighting not Skynet, right? They're fighting Legion, but it might as well be Skynet. It's totally the same. There's no really meaningful difference. It might as well just be Skynet. Terminator Dark Fate really resets Sarah Connor's character arc. It totally undoes what she learns at the end of Terminator 2, so she's just back to where she was before, just for the sake of fan service, it seems. However, a lot of people hate the fact that this movie killed John Connor, right? But to me, that was actually probably the most interesting parts of the movie. What if there was another Terminator sent back in time, a Ronin without its master, who kills John Connor, but doing this for a war that now doesn't exist? What happens when a Terminator completes its mission, right? What happens? It just goes off and does nothing? No, it kind of evolves and assimilates into society. And I thought all that was really interesting. And I think to make John Connor the main character again, it just would have been too corny, where it would almost seem like Connor is like this sacred person in the timeline. It's like, I think it's fine, right? If Judgment Day doesn't happen, if Skynet's not created, then Connor is not needed. But I do think the direction of Dark Fate was really good. I think Tim Miller knew what he was really doing compared to like other past directors in the franchise. He really allows Dark Fate to have some fangs. It doesn't really feel as sanitized. It has some edge to it, some intensity, and some creative concepts. And I do think it's entertaining. I think it's just dragged too much down by trying to be too much of a legacy sequel. Number 3, Terminator Zero. Yeah, so I did a whole review on Terminator Zero, so you guys can check that out if you want a more in-depth critique of that. But honestly, yeah, I think it's one of the most better entries in the Terminator franchise in a long, long time. First of all, what I love about Terminator Zero is that it's much more like a horror, similar to the first Terminator. It just felt like a breath of fresh air in that regard. On top of that, I think you have an amazing new cast of characters. Right, they're totally getting away from John Connor, but in a way that it feels more like narratively compelling and earned with a lot of potential and depth to it, as well as having beautiful animation that really complements the really dreadful scenario that's portrayed in the series. Number 2, Terminator 2. Yeah, this is hard, deciding, who's going to be Terminator 2 or Terminator 1. But I'm putting Terminator 2 in this place. I feel confident in doing that. I think Terminator 2 is incredibly rewatchable. It's one of the best action films ever made. On top of that, you have a film that I think really strikes a perfect balance between intense and scary, but entertaining, kind of funny and humorous at times, but it never goes overboard. It never really takes you out of the film like a lot of movies do today, where there's like a feeling of insincerity. No, Terminator 2 is very, very sincere. It knows when to be scary, and knows when to like take the load off of you, just so you can have like fun and watch a great spectacle. But yeah, it's one of the most best directed action films ever made. I think does enough to really make itself stand apart from the first film, so it doesn't really feel like a copy of the film. Yes, it's a chase film, but it does enough to make it different and unique. Finally, number 1, The Terminator. Yeah, so The Terminator is full on through, I think, more so a horror film than an action film. And it's not so much that I think like, oh, horror is better than action or smarter than action. That's not the case. I mean, for example, in my Aliens ranking, I actually put Aliens above the first one. But the reason why I put the first Terminator over the second as like the best in the franchise isn't just because of the horror aspect, but because I think the horror aspect really complements what the story of Terminator has always been about, in its root, which is a fear of technology and the Cold War and what humans are capable of when it comes to war and destruction. And the cinematography and lighting is just beautiful and amazing. It's the best in the franchise, and like I said, it really complements those themes, I think. And on top of that, Arnold in this film is like nightmare material. This is probably one of the only films where I feel like the Terminator really is this unstoppable killing machine with no reason. And on top of that, I really do like the soundtrack. It's my favorite soundtrack in the franchise. I really appreciate how this film does end in a kind of a time loop, especially with the extended ending. If you've seen that, it just feels like a very self-contained story. And films like, as much as I love Terminator 2, it kind of messes up a little bit. It kind of adds some confusion to it. But I think in Terminator 1 by itself, it's just the time loop and the story. It just makes perfect sense. It's poetic. It's perfect. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching. I'm really curious to see what your favorite Terminator film is, or there's anything in the ranking that you would change, assuming you disagree with me, or maybe you do agree with me. But regardless, let me know in the comments. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. I'll see you next time.